Good afternoon, fantasy football fans. I'm Jeff DiMatteo of Gridiron Ratings, and you are watching the Dynasty Green Room. With me, as usual, back from his 1 week hiatus, Rotoballer's very own Kyle Lindemann. Kyle, how you doing today?
Good, man. I'm a little jealous. Wish I would have been down there at the Senior Bowl with you, enjoying that seafood and seeing everything that was to be seen. Sounds like you had quite a week.
Oh man, it was real busy. I'm embarrassed to say I didn't get into the seafood next year, and I'll drag you down there with me. We'll get an Airbnb or something.
Oh,
We'll
we're
get
doing
you
it
in
next
there.
year for sure, no question.
Definitely, we're gonna have to drag our boy Kevin Coleman with us from Football Guys too, and make it a party.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So got a chance to see these guys up close and personal. Spent all week at practice. Did not go to the game. Had some family obligations to meet. Had to come home on Friday. Didn't even watch it yet. So by this recording, it's Sunday evening. I have not seen the game to this point. It is DVR'd. I plan on watching it and giving a little bit more of an update after that. So today we're going to talk about just kind of mostly practices. I'm thinking we start quarterbacks. Who do you want to hear about first? Like, where should we begin?
Probably Mr. MVP of the Senior Bowl himself, Mr. Spencer Rattler.
Spencer Rattler. Look, I heard parts of the game on the radio, right? Obviously, it looks like he had a great game. I didn't see it, so I can't speak to that. In practice, he had a few very impressive throws. However, a couple of things concerned me. His biggest plays always seemed to go to his boy, Xavier Legette. Legette turned a couple of questionable throws that had a little bit of steam on them into big-time catches. Kind of gave me some pause. I wondered, if we pulled Legette off the field while Rattler's out there, is it going to turn into a situation where this guy just can't complete to anybody? The skill players that were around him, though, in those practices for the American team, frankly, not as good as what we saw on the national team. So Rattler looked, good. I wouldn't say he was markedly better than the other guys that were out there. You got to remember, we had Michael Penix on the other side. We had Bo Nix on the other side. Sam Hartman was out there. A lot of other guys. But I would say that in my eyes, after really Penix and Nix, I've got Rattler right in there. They all had a very similar week for different reasons. Rattler did interview very well. So for those of you that are worried he's a personality problem and he has some issues, he's cocky or this or that, or he's otherwise a problem, very humble kid. I thought he acquitted himself very nicely in the interviews, in one-on-one sessions, and in the group settings. Very, understanding of who he is and how he's perceived. And he's trying to change those perceptions and show himself not as that cocky kid we saw at Oklahoma, but as a grown man who's learned from his mistakes and is looking to continue to grow and learn in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I feel like my ideal landing spot for him, this might sound strange, my ideal landing spot for him would actually be the Chiefs. Like, go sit behind Mahomes and, soak it up with Andy Reid for 3 years. Maybe they can showcase you for a game or two and then, trade you for a second-round pick or something in 3 years. I would love that for him. I feel like that's, because he has, so much upside in the arm and, he can do – obviously, we're not going to compare any QBs to Mahomes. That's stupid. But, he has some of that, right? He has some of those plays where he could play a game and you're like, oh, my God, this guy's unbelievable. And then he comes out the next week and you're like, how the hell is this guy even starting? Because, the range of outcomes are just so vast with him.
Well, and they absolutely are. And we saw that on film with him. I made it through about 4 games with him, and it was tough because when he'd get against, good competition to great competition, in the SEC, there's a lot of that, right? He kind of withered. He evaporated to a point. Against the bad teams, though, hey, a lot of big-time throws, a lot of big yards. He scrambles, he runs. He's got a little bit of everything in his tool belt there. It's just a matter of, can he put all those tools together and use them consistently? Place like Kansas City where he can sit and there's no pressure, I think that'd be excellent. Really, he should be in a place where he can go and sit for a while. Trouble is, he might get drafted too early for that. There's a very real possibility that some of these other quarterbacks are going to slide more than we realize. And Rattler could be lifting himself up the board with his demonstrated maturity through the interview process.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's going to depend on what the Bears do. I do feel pretty good about the Bears and the Commanders taking a quarterback, but New England at 3, I'm definitely not convinced as much as everybody else is that that's what they're going to do for sure. And then, of course, that's when things get dicey, right? Because it's
sure, and
all of a sudden they don't take a quarterback, and it's like it's like a domino effect, right? Like so many things change.
Absolutely. And right now, let's just assume it's going to be quarterback, quarterback, quarterback at the top. And let's assume those guys are going to be Caleb, Drake, and Jaden Daniels. You're probably still going to see JJ McCarthy. You're probably still going to see at least Bo Nix. And you may see Michael Penix ahead of Rattler in this draft, which could push him into that kind of late 2, early 3 potentially. And if he's in that spot, that's right in the range for Kansas City to kind of pounce on him. But Kansas City, they're a team that, hey, very young on defense, but they've got to find some pass catchers. They have to figure out how they're going to build around the aging Travis Kelce. You've got Rashee Rice, but is he really a 1 or is he going to be a 2 for them? So I wonder if they're going to invest that early. But I do love the fit in having him sit for a year.
Definitely.
So, I mean, we had a few other guys there. Had a little bit of one-on-one time with Bo Nix. And anybody who's watched the show or kept up with these episodes knows I've been really ice cold on that guy. And I think you and I are both kind of on the fence with him a little bit, right? The film hasn't been what we wanted it to be. And there's been a few lapses here and there. He interviewed really well. The kid acquits himself very nicely in person. Really nice stand-up kid. Very authentic. Loves football. There was 2 players the entire week that you just know they love the game more than anything, and that was Bo Nix and running back Dylan Lobby. Those 2 guys, first dudes out to practice, first guys talking to the media. They're just fantastic people. Nix, we're going to stay there. Kid wants to coach. He's busy absorbing the offense and absorbing all of the skills of everybody around him and where they're supposed to be and how they see the field every single day. 6th offense in 6 years, I think is what we came to, this year when he gets drafted. I think he's got the mental acumen for it. He's there. I'd love to see him sit. We keep talking about JJ McCarthy, Rams, Vikings, sitting a year. That could be Bo Nix, and he could go ahead of Penix, who, truthfully, a lot of people liked Penix, said he threw the ball better, this and that. Nix did the little things. He was correcting where guys were lined up. He was helping them run a better route or choosing a better route to beat a particular corner. These are the little coaching mechanisms that he was demonstrating on the field that, to me, if I'm a coach, and I've been in those rooms, right? I've spent some time doing some coaching. I love that. I love seeing a guy who takes command, understands what's supposed to be going on, and then delivers on it. And so, Bo Nix, I'm not sure where you stand on him at this point, but that was a guy that I thought was very impressive.
It's funny because I had that tweet about Jackson Powers Johnson, the Oregon center, who, Dane Brugler has been gushing about, even said this, past week on Prospect of Pros podcast, he thinks there's a chance he could go in the teens as a center.
Yep.
Now, this guy can also play guard. So I had a post about him that went viral, and his mom actually followed me. And I sent her a message. We were just talking to like draft rumors. I was like, "Oh, what are you hearing?" She's like, "What are you hearing?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not like an NFL. I'm not an NFL insider on that, but like, I follow the draft pretty closely. Like, I was telling her, I was like, hey, I love Zach Frazier. I really like Graham Barton, who could play as a center, but those guys don't move like JPJ does. And we talked a little bit about Oregon football, and I asked her about Bo Nix. I was like, yeah, no, I got to be honest with you. I wasn't so sure about Bo Nix. I kind of, no offense, but, the way Oregon's offense runs, sometimes was very easy for the quarterback, which is when they get to the NFL is not going to be that easy. So long story short, I was definitely had my concerns about Bo Nix, and I talked about this a little bit last night, kind of reiterated off what you said. Hey, this guy's going to be 24, but to his credit, he's got better every year. And I think you and I maybe a little bit were like comping him to Will Levis, and I think it was like we kind of had a brain trust moment this week where it was like, maybe he's not really Will Levis in the sense of, I think this guy's got a really, really high football IQ. He really, really, really wants it. And I think he knows where to go with the ball. He knows everything he needs to do. I think maybe it's a matter of, hey, this guy's going to be 24. Is he kind of maxed out athletically in terms of like how good of a quarterback he can be? I question the ceiling, but what I don't question is, hey, can this guy be can he make an immediate impact if he has a good enough supporting cast around him, for 4 years on a rookie contract? Then I think maybe we're talking about something.
Yeah, I think right now, after watching him in person and seeing all of the, people kind of been dogging him a little bit for the whole, all of his passes are from 0 to 9 yards and this and that. I had a chance to see him throw it further than that down the field, and he looked fine. Did he blow the combine or blow the Senior Bowl away? No, he didn't. But he looked fine. He looked good enough. He checked the box. And when I couple his awareness, his football IQ, his love of the game, and those things to the fact that he can kind of check all these other boxes, to me, I think he's kind of like a more athletic version of like Derek Carr. He's a guy that can come in, give you a stable hand, complete some passes, and do what he needs to do. He's probably not the kind of guy you're going to build your franchise around, and that's okay. I think we're seeing right now there's a lot of quarterbacks in the league that are doing a great job winning a lot of football games who aren't Patrick Mahomes. And so that's a guy like Bo Nix. If he lands in the right spot, let's just say it's Minnesota, he can get the ball to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson, and they'll be able to figure it out, right? And that defense is porous enough where if Nix is the guy, I mean, he could be huge for fantasy. He could just be sitting there dinking and dunking his way to a QB1 season. I'm not saying that's my projected slot and projected outcome, but it's in the realm of possibility. So, I mean, Nix is a guy that I've really warmed to, and truthfully, I think I'm budging him, kind of pushing him ahead of the guy we're about to talk about next, and that's Michael Penix. I know you and I both love the way the ball comes off Penix's hands, but man, I'll tell you, like, he had great looking throws. Had a few of those little coaching moments where he was kind of getting guys directed and putting the ball where it should be, and other guys kind of screwed up. But after talking with him, I just didn't get the same vibes off him I got off Bo Nix. Nix was just everything about him just came off so positive, not rehearsed, exceptionally authentic. And I don't want to, say anything negative about Michael Penix, but it just wasn't it didn't come off the same way. He had good answers. He was a nice, cordial young man, as he should be, right? But not playing in the game on Saturday, didn't kind of get the same, want to be a coach, love the game. Like, I didn't get those same vibes from him. When I think about two players that are kind of closely graded, I'm going with the guy who really loves the game and really wants that extra. If it's not playing football, he's going to be coaching or scouting or doing something else. He loves it that much. I think I'm going with Nix here because we know what Penix is, right? Strong-armed guy, a little bit of an injury history. He was asked ad nauseum about all of his injuries and everything else. I think by the time I got to him, he was probably a little annoyed with it. And I don't blame him, right? It's like when you're getting asked the same questions for 3 straight days, he's probably a little over it, right? But I think for me, I wouldn't have nudged him down the way I did if he'd played on Saturday. So take that for what you will, but that's my thought on Penix this week.
Yeah, I think part of the tough eval, I think you and I have talked about how this guy's very much a rhythm passer. Like, he's got to get in rhythm early in the game. If he doesn't get in rhythm, it doesn't feel like he gets, it's almost kind of like a pitcher, right? That I'm trying to think of a good example, but I can think of like one or two pitchers. He's got to get the first
few outs as a pitcher. Yeah, you get in there as a pitcher,
if they
get a few outs, a couple ground balls. You need
if they get through the first or second inning and they get into that groove, it's like, and Penix is almost kind of the same way. But I think the hard thing about Penix is, did I cut out?
We lost John. Yeah, I think we lost you on audio there for a second, Kyle. I was trying to.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you now.
Oh, so I think the hard part about Penix is we don't realize, like, this dude had an unbelievable supporting cast. And I don't want to take that away from him, but it's like, man, you could make the case that his 3 receivers in college were probably better than 4 or 5 NFL teams. I mean, if we're being honest.
Yeah,
his offensive line was very good. He hardly got sacked. So I like Penix. I'm just starting to look at him more as a day 2 guy who could get a shot. Like, maybe the Raiders decide, hey, like, it's too expensive to trade up. We can't trade back. Like, we got to stay put, take the best player. We're going to see how the chips fall on day 2 of the draft. Maybe when they're there in early second round, Penix is still there. If they don't make a move at quarterback, I could see a team like that being interested, because I feel like, he could play right away. He's got enough weapons around him to be okay.
Sure. I kind of love the idea of Seattle having him. I'm with it. Stick him behind Geno. Can we do that for a year? Could Seattle trade back into the first and take him? Maybe. Like, I'd love that. Pacific Northwest guy,
I think
the last couple of years.
They're definitely a wild card because they got the new head coach. Pete Carroll's not there. I think Pete Carroll never really wanted to rebuild. and he did a hell
Right.
of a job never having to rebuild, keeping them competitive
Sure.
all these years, which is pretty amazing. But I think it was time for a change in Seattle. I think it was pretty clear, and I'm definitely curious to see what they do, because I don't think with Pete Carroll being gone that they're all in on Geno. They can get out of his contract after this 2024 for not that bad. So wouldn't shock me at all if
Sure.
somebody fell that Seattle would pull the trigger.
Well, absolutely. And if we think about a guy like Penix and we say, hey, look, you did it with, Rome and Polk and McMillan and the guys they had, with the Huskies last year, and you go and you stick him with DK, Lockett, JSN, the running backs, Walker and Charbonnet, you got Fant at tight end,
Mm-hmm.
like that's a whole collection of weapons. So with the way he can fire it all over the field, DK becomes an instant asset. And so I would love that. We'll see where the chips fall. It's a little early. Excuse me, I apologize. Fighting with some allergies here, I think.
No
But
worries.
yeah, absolutely. Love a couple of those spots, and we'll talk more about landing spots as we get a little deeper into the process. But I know time's kind of getting to be a factor for us tonight, so I'm just going to buzz through a few other names. Joe Milton. Hey, the guy's got all of the athletic ability, right? He can run, fire the ball all the way down the field, do whatever you want. Honestly, I didn't see the accuracy from him. I didn't really love it. I would have liked to have seen him show off the mobility a bit more. Didn't get to see quite
Yeah.
enough from him to elevate him. Michael Pratt, see it, throw it kind of guy. Just felt like he was always a couple of ticks late on pretty much every throw. A couple nice ones here and
Yeah.
there, but for the most part, he just wasn't it. Sam Hartman, great touch, had a little bit of trouble delivering the fastball. And we already knew that about him. Kind of feels like a really handsome version of Gardner Minshew at this point. But yeah, I think that's the quarterbacks, man. Anything else we should probably share with anybody about quarterbacks at this point?
Uh, Joe Milton probably has one of the best arms I've ever seen. Like, this guy could probably throw it 80 plus yards. Like, it's outrageous how this guy can just throw it through a brick wall. But he's slightly older prospect. I would have liked to have seen him done a little bit more this year, but he definitely is someone that people are going to be at the combine, and he's going to make a couple throws and people are going to be like, "Oh my god!" And that wouldn't surprise me at all. But yeah, it's, we always get so excited for those trick shots and those, you know once a month NFL throws, like that Zach Wilson throw from 3 years ago that everybody fell in love with. That
Right,
probably happens like twice a year, right?
right.
Um, so much of the NFL is being able to win over the middle, set 5 yards here, 7 yards here, 10 yards here. Everybody loves the big plays, but it's like those little plays are what makes a quarterback. And I feel like sometimes when we go through the scouting process, we forget about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's with Joe Milton, it's not his arm strength that bothers me; it's the accuracy, even down the field. We sit in a spot here where I was talking to a couple of guys, and they'll remain nameless to protect the innocent here. But there was some comments about, man, we really want to see Milton, drop it in the bucket. And I looked over at the guys and I said, man, I'd be happy if he could drop it in the swimming pool, because it just felt like everything he was throwing down to the pylon on some of these nine routes and some of these other deeper throws, he just wasn't in the same zip code. And to me, somebody's going to take him. Somebody's going to say, I can fix this, I can fix that, yada, yada, yada. I'm not taking him for fantasy. I'm not interested. Maybe that's going to bite me in the backside, but I'm out. I'm going to stick with the guys at the top, the premium dudes. There's only 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL, barring injury. This guy's not one of them. And so that's kind of where my head's at right now.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like he's a little bit older prospect, but I feel like he's honestly someone that would benefit from playing a year or two in the XFL, right? So, like, he
Oh,
could still be
UFL
on
now.
a
It's the
UFL,
UFL.
yeah,
Yeah.
UFL. Whereas like he's still on an NFL roster,
Right.
but like, an NFL team like loans him out to the UFL and he can play and get reps. Like, I would love to see something like that between the NFL and UFL happen, because I think there's a lot of guys with potential that maybe just are not ready to play in the NFL. And when you only have 46 guys active on Sunday, like, you just can't afford to have holes in your roster. And with how little job security these coaches and GMs have, like, they're not going to take a 5-year view. They got to win within 2 or 3 years or they're gone.
Sure. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
the NFL really doesn't prioritize like long-term player development like baseball or basketball does.
Well, yeah, there's just no time anymore, and you get fewer padded practices and the whole bit. But Let's talk about some better positions, frankly, in terms of talent, overall talent. Let's shoot to running back because I know we really want to get to wide receiver. That's going to be the meat and potatoes of the whole show here. But hey, the good Marshawn Lloyd, as advertised. The guy looks like an NFL back. He has a great jump cut. The guy was quick to the hole, looked great in all the drills. He caught the ball exceptionally well. Really fluid getting upfield. Still a little stiff in the hips, but he does a nice job plucking and tucking the ball, getting around the corner and getting upfield. Thought he looked really good. Cody Schrader at a Mizzou. I'll be honest. I thought this guy was kind of so-so. Thought a good college back probably wouldn't translate to the next level. Didn't seem to have that next gear. Schrader was incredible in all of the drills. The guy caught the ball exceptionally well. Really quick feet. He was unreal. I'll have a written write-up on him at some point in the very near future. Ray Davis out of Kentucky looked really good. And then the surprise guy for me, a lot of the guys that are kind of the hardcore draft nicks were into this guy, Dylan Lobby, literally the first guy out of the tunnel every morning at practice. They opened the gates between 8:30 and 8:45. I know because I was there at 8:15 waiting, like a complete crazy person. First person into the stadium, and then there's Dylan Lobby walking up just a little while later, getting his stretch on and getting his work in before anyone else at the field. Loved the work ethic. Loved how personable he was. Had a chance to chat with his dad, who was in the stands with us there at the Senior Bowl.
That's right.
Super nice family. And
they're New Yorkers, aren't they? Like Long Island, I think.
Yeah. So, like I said, really nice folks. Hard work is the key. Work ethic has been just beaten into this guy over the course of his life, right? And you see it. You see it in the way he works, the way he practices, the way he gets his reps in. And he is quick to try and steal every rep he can. Absolutely love it. But, a couple of the guys that surprised, DeJuan Edwards, I thought was a surprise. Kid out of Georgia, I had no expectations. Really quick feet, lightning quick. He was far from the best back. I'd say he was probably fifth in terms of all of the backs at the Senior Bowl this week. But I really love guys that have quick feet like that because it means they can usually shuffle around and make guys miss in the hole. And then Michael Wiley out of Arizona. This guy's a receiving back, and he can do some things. I'd like to see a little bit more long speed, kind of like some of these other backs we talked about. Not a ton of power there. Got nicked up a little bit. We're going to see where we're at with that. A couple other guys were there, got hurt early. The kid from Marshall went down. He went down early, so we didn't get to see much of him. But yeah, man, this group right here.
He had the ruptured biceps, right?
Yeah, that's a sad deal, man, because he had a couple of reps, looked pretty good, and it was like, man, okay, kind of want to see some more, and then he went down, and that was the end of that. But yeah, I mean, Marshawn Lloyd, as advertised, he should probably be the RB1 in this class if you're not into Jonathan Brooks or if you're not into Trey Benson or somebody like that or Jalen Wright. Mm-hmm. Great hands, great feet, just kind of does everything really well. To me, probably an early third, late second in the NFL draft, probably a mid-second in your fantasy draft. So what would you like to know or hear about when it comes to these other backs? Or what should we be sharing, I should say?
Well, I think with Lobby, I had heard from like other reports that he looked like a really, really good natural receiver out of the backfield. And I forget who it was. Somebody comped him to Danny Woodhead. If you think that's a great comp. Decent comp. So it's not a great running back class. I think last year, obviously, we had Bijan and Gibbs. Like, we don't have that in this class. So I think people got to adjust their expectations. I do like Jonathan Brooks. Kind of harder because he's coming off that ACL, which has me a little. Right. I'm not, maybe for other positions it's not as big of a deal, but for running back, it's like you got to be able to cut. If you can't cut and your knee's not full strength, you know what I mean? It's just, and we can say that for every position, but like for running back, it's just especially as important. I'm kind of with you on the, Marshawn Lloyd. I don't know if I see a running back going in the top 50 in this draft. Maybe somebody at the end of round 2, probably, if I had to guess.
Yeah, maybe.
But plenty of running backs in round 3, round 4, I think is good. And I think, yes, we saw Bijan and Gibbs get drafted high, but I think the majority of NFL front offices don't feel that way about the running back position. They're probably not going to do it.
Right.
So.
Well, I'll tell you, hanging out downtown in Mobile after practice and after hours, you kind of get to hear enough conversation. Everyone's talking about players, and there's different scouts and people at these, bars and restaurants, and they all talk a little bit. You hear a little bit about this guy or that guy. And I wasn't getting the impression that any of these guys improved their stock to the point where you could say, hey, that's a locked in second round pick. Probably going to be a lot of third round picks there. The only team I could see really saying, hey, you know what, jumping up and getting a guy at the end of the second is if a team really feels like they have a need and they don't want to miss their guy because there is going to be a running back run somewhere probably in the middle of the third. And, I could see a team, heck, I don't know, if you're picking in the back 16, going ahead and making a trade and popping up into the back of the second saying, hey, we're going to go get our guy, Marshawn Lloyd, Jalen Wright, whoever. And that's a possibility.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I kind of go back and forth. Some of these positions, like wide receiver, for instance, it's such a deep position, and maybe teams will be like, oh, whatever, we'll just get our guy in the second round. But like, I just feel like that's hard because the drafts are so different. Like we do that in our fantasy drafts all the time, and how many times do we get burned because like the draft doesn't go anywhere near the way we thought it would.
Yep.
So
just get your guys. It's I'm looking at you, Chicago Bears. Just take your guy.
You got to make your first pick to the best of your ability without trying to figure out how the next 31 picks are going to go before you pick again. You know what I mean? Right. I mean, sure, there's times where it works out in your favor, but hey, if you take a wide receiver and then, hey, this other wide receiver we liked is still there in round 2, then just take another one.
Yeah, just keep tapping the position. Well, speaking of wide receiver,
if they're both the highest guy on your board,
absolutely. Well, and I mean, running back is running back, and I don't know there's a ton to really cover there. Wide receiver, though, is the meat and potatoes of this draft class. You've already alluded to it. Let's talk about some receivers. Day one, Roman Wilson was completely unstoppable. This was a guy that he was pretty low on my list, and some people called me out on Twitter over it. Like, what do you mean he's low on your list? I said, well, there's a lot of high-end talent in this class. Someone has to be at the bottom. And Roman Wilson, for me, was kind of one of those guys where I was like, he just never looked special. Well, he didn't look special on day one either. He just looked open, always. Everyone I spoke to, no one could figure it out. It's like the guy was so smooth, so fluid. He was just effortlessly moving around, through, and away from people in such a way where you're always wondering, how is he that open? Why is he that open? And, I'll tell you, we didn't see it as much in day two, right? Everyone kind of tightened up a little bit, and Roman got a little nicked up. And so we ended up seeing a lot less of him throughout the rest of the week. But man, that day one performance, if we see some of that at the next level, this guy's going to be a fantasy dynamo, and he's probably going to be basically free in your draft. So love Roman Wilson. Lad McConkey, killer week. This guy, he was voted one of the MVPs by the players. Let's let me pull my handy dandy list out here. Brendan Rice. The only way they could stop this guy is by holding him. He drew so many DPIs in practice that my mind was blown. I was like, they just can't stop this kid. The only guy that gave him any grief was the corner out of Oregon. And that's defense. We'll talk about him on another show. Ricky Pearsall looked really good. Malachi Corley is a grown man. This is the closest thing to Deebo Samuel in this class. He is a bully out there knocking people over. He looked great on end-around snaps. Not as refined as a receiver as you'd like for him to be. Yeah. But you gotta love the ability to use him as a weapon, especially if he ends up somewhere. Imagine a place like Houston. You got Bobby Slowick. He knows how to use Deebo already. You've got Nico. You got Tank. You can't really stack the box, right? Now you got Malachi Corley running around, hitting jet sweeps and going out there and beating people up downfield. That seems like a match made in heaven. But yeah, those are some of the guys that were really good. Johnny Wilson, I thought was pretty terrible as a perimeter receiver. I thought he looked good when moved inside. To me, this guy's a future tight end. I don't care what anybody says. He's best suited for inside work and being somewhere near the line. I don't know if he's a traditional Y, probably more of a Jimmy Graham style slot tight end. Jacob Cowing, a lot of people still in on Cowing from Arizona. He didn't separate himself. He didn't look that good. People were comparing him to Tank Dell. That couldn't be further from the truth. He's just not that good. He's fine, but he's not great. Devontae Walker. This kid looked absolutely lost the first day. Bo Nix is out there redirecting him. Penix is out there redirecting him. Seemed like he didn't really have a sense of where he was supposed to be lined up all the time. had trouble getting open, getting separation. And when he did, he wasn't getting passes thrown his way. A couple drops, couple nice catches, really mixed bag of results from him. Jamari
I'm
Thrash.
mad at the NCAA for that.
Yeah.
Remember the NCAA, they didn't let him play for the first 4 to 6 weeks, right?
100%. And that could be part of it, right? But one of the things that concerned me is that we weren't seeing these same kind of mental lapses from other receivers on the field. And so to me, the concern was that, he could have missed those 6 weeks, but everyone had the same playbook for the same amount of time as he did. And everyone else knew where they were supposed to be. He didn't. And so I'm kind of looking at that and I'm like, the talent, physical talent is undeniable. But if you don't have it between the ears, you kind of become one of those cautionary tales, right? And I'm not saying he doesn't have it, but I'm saying, hey, I really need to see a lot more from him throughout the rest of this process to feel good about putting him on my fantasy team. Let's see. Ryan Flournoy was a guy that ran just a ton of 9 routes. Ton of stuff underneath is already on film for him. They ran 9s. The guy had a pretty good win rate. It seemed like every time he was taking these 9s, he had about a half step to a step on a lot of the DBs. So that's a guy that could be one of those late round flyers that you look at. And then lastly, and this is a guy you'll probably want to talk about some, Xavier Legette. Man, he was invisible the first day. Then the second day, he popped up a little bit. Third day, guy was balling out, making a couple really great catches, some highlight reel type stuff. Another guy that's really strong, kind of a bully. He's not real tall. Obviously, we saw that with the measurements, not nearly as tall as advertised, but he's strong. Goes up to the catch point, does a nice job. Not as reliable hands-wise as you'd like him to be. Ball kind of gets in on his body some. What are you going to do? But he's, instead of wide receiver 5 or 6, like some people have had him pegged, he's probably closer to 8, 9, or 10. But if he plays somewhere, heck, that could be a real value.
Definitely.
So I think the question is who should we go back and really talk about? Like, who do you want to cover?
Well, I think I was a little disappointed with Legette's measurements, right? He only measured in at about 6'1". I mean, yeah, maybe it's not the end of the world if his arms are long. If he's only 6'1". I was kind of thinking he was probably 6'3". Mm-hmm. So is it at the end of the world? I'm slightly concerned he's a slightly older prospect. He's 23?
Yeah, a lot of these guys are older, though.
But we got some really young receivers in this class. So
True.
I'm not saying I'm out on Legette. I don't know if I probably have him in that top 8. I think there's 7 or 8 receivers who I feel like are kind of head and shoulders above the rest.
Sure.
Probably we have that tier of 3 that are head and shoulders above, but that 4 through 8 I feel like is very good too. Just kind of depends on your flavor. And I'm with you on the Roman Wilson. I think the thing with Roman Wilson that I try to get people to remember is it's the same argument for J.J. McCarthy. Yes, they're on a good team and they were in a good offense, but they were in a good running offense with a good defense. And right. Michigan had the best defense in college football. So they were never going to drop back to throw 30 times a game because there was no point. They went 15-0 and they leaned into what they do best, which is run the ball and get a lead on you, and then there's guys off the edge are pinning their ears back, and you can't score. I mean, and that's exactly what they did. So they didn't need Wilson to be a 1,000-yard receiver. So I feel like every draft class, I'm always looking for those 3 or 4 receivers. I always say that's the wide receiver arbitrage. That because as a receiver, you're dependent on the number of pass attempts your team throws, and you're dependent on the quarterback. If you don't have both of those, you're just not going to have eye-popping stats. So I think with Wilson, I try to look at it okay, how would he have produced if he'd have been in a different offense? I think you put this guy in a different team, I think you're very happy with the results. So I definitely see why teams like him. I still don't really view him as more than a mid day 2 guy. I don't know if I would take him above pick 50 in the draft, but having that said, that I still like him, but I'm not going to put him above those other guys. I wouldn't have him above Malachi Corley and that.
Sure. Well, and the thing with Wilson for me is, and I'm going to have to go back and watch his cut-ups all over again, because I always just kind of felt like he just kind of looked good, but nothing ever really stood out. And that was true at practice, too.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't an attribute where I can say, wow, did you see that? Except for it was just, wow, he's always open. You gotta love guys that always get open. And that to
Mm-hmm.
me is going to be really crucial. He's probably moving up my ranks as we speak. I'm going to rewatch those cutups, see where we go. But the guy is really, he might be the most fluid receiver in the class, not named Marvin Harrison. So again, going to rewatch, want to take a look, going to go back over the practice footage. But man, he just looks really, really special. Keep an eye on him. If you're doing early drafts right now, I'm not afraid to take him in the second. Now, I'm going to go grab him because he showed enough where enough decision makers and scouts are looking at him saying, whoa, there's something to this guy. He's not the biggest dude out there, but man, he's just fluid and smooth. You know, I don't even really have a great comp for him. It's just like, okay, well, who's always open? It's like, give me a guy who's not terribly big, but fast enough, and he just does everything enough, right? He checks all the boxes. That's Roman Wilson. He's just checking all the boxes. But yeah, love that guy. Obviously Brendan Rice, Ladd McConkey helped themselves out. Really wanted to see a bit more out of Luke McCaffrey, but what are you going to do when you're buried behind all this other talent? Like McCaffrey's probably going to be a backup special teamer somewhere, but he could find his way on an NFL field also.
Yeah, for sure.
So
I
let's
think that's a good point about McConkey. I like him too. I don't necessarily view him as a round one receiver. I feel like he's a really good guy for day two. If he's been banged up a lot, he hasn't played a lot, but I definitely like what I see from him. He's special when he gets the ball in his hands, and he's versatile. Like I feel like he's a guy that he can do a lot of things. Like I could see, even though they have a ton of talent already, like I could see the Rams really using a receiver like him on all the end arounds and stuff that they do.
That was funny. It's actually something we talked about, and I say we. There's a bunch of us hanging out there at practice talking about prospects, and we are talking about Ladd going there to the Rams with Cup and Puka, and it's like, well, how do you cover any of those guys? Because you're going to have McConkey just killing you. He can go to the perimeter, he can go inside, he can beat you on a whip, he can beat you on a crosser. The only thing with him is he's on the ground an awful lot. I wonder if he's really going to stay healthy at the next level. That's complete speculation, though. Let's not put a lot of weight into that kind of comment. What I will say is he's got great hands, got good quickness. If we take Hunter Renfro's best season of his career, that's probably going to be prime Ladd McConkey for 4 or 5 years. So if you liked Hunter Renfro a couple of years ago when he put up that big fantasy season, that's probably what we're going to get from Ladd for a more extended period of time. He's a much better version of Hunter Renfro, so hard not to love him.
That's fair.
But,
Were there any tight ends that really stood out this week? I didn't feel like there really were.
Look, I love Theo Johnson. Wanted to see him run. He ran great. He's a big boy, traditional wide tight end. Got to stand next to him for a little bit, and he is just an absolute mountain. He's going to be able to play in line at the next level, and he could probably play right away. To me, he was like a faster CJ Uzama, kind of a big target, good hands, good reach, good extension, makes a lot of catches that you wouldn't really – you're not going to look at it and say, wow, that was a really hard catch, but it wasn't really an easy catch either, right? He makes the tough stuff look a little more routine. He's not terribly fast, but he's fast enough. Just kind of, again, like we talked about with Roman, he's checking all the boxes, right? That's a guy that's going to be a really nice tight end for somebody. You got Jaheim Bell, Florida State. That guy, he's an H-back, right? This is a guy that could probably play a little bit of fullback, probably some of that Kyle Juszczyk sort of a role. He looked really nice all week. And then Johnny Wilson. I know I said he looked bad as a perimeter receiver. This guy, when moved inside on the drills, moved inside of the numbers, near the hashes even, depending on how the drill was aligned, the guy just loves having room to work. And his reach and his catch radius is absolutely enormous. I love him as kind of like a prime Jimmy Graham style, slot tight end. Imagine like almost like a more hopped up version of Antonio Gates. He's going to be that kind of a player if a team is willing to push him inside and he's willing to learn that position. He's not going to be a blocker. He's not stopping anybody with blocking. That's just not his game. But if you can get him inside, force a mismatch on a linebacker, on a safety, that guy's absolutely going to destroy some people. Could very well be what we've been hoping Kyle Pitts would become a whole lot quicker. But yeah, I mean, that's the offense, man. We're not going to go into defense today because that's another show. We'll get there eventually. We're just not there tonight. But I mean, what are we missing? What do the viewers need here that we haven't already talked about?
Well, I would just say it's important to have situational awareness of the draft. Like, it might not matter for fantasy, but this is a very deep tackle draft. I would say it's a deep draft for like edge rushers. He fought like 4 or 5 guys who I think are very good. I don't think there's like a Myles Garrett or like a Nick Bosa in this class. If Will Anderson was in this class, I think he would still be the best edge rusher.
100%.
Quarterback is pretty, yeah, quarterback is pretty deep. I think it's, probably not fair to compare it to 2020 because 2020 was awesome, but probably maybe what we hoped 2021 would be, right? That's
Right.
kind of how I'm looking at this QB class. We had a lot of guys who went early, but like a lot of them really didn't pan out. I'm thinking 2020 would be ridiculous, but I think probably going to be what we thought 2021 would be, in my opinion. Running back is not a deep class at all, but I'm not on the boat of, oh, this running back class stinks. You can't draft any of these running backs for fantasy because the 2017 running back class, so many of those guys that have been starters for so long, like those guys are getting older now. And eventually in Dalvin Cook, Dalvin Cook just basically the wheels came off this year, I hate to say it, but he's probably done. And he was someone who, had a starting job in the league for so long, Alvin Kamara. I think McCaffrey's still going to be pretty good, obviously, but I think McCaffrey will probably still be good for another 2 or 3 years because he's just such a good receiver. But yeah, that like 2017 class, those guys are just getting older, so inevitably someone has to take their place. So I do think there's enough guys in this class who could make waves, but at the same time, I'm not going to overdraft them.
Sure.
Wide receiver, obviously very good, much better than last year, in my opinion. We had some good receivers last year, but we didn't really have any of those like big X-type receivers you can put on the outside that are big, going to win those jump balls. You can't leave them one-on-one. Last year's receiving class was good, but those guys were very small.
Sure.
Yep. A lot of these guys can just win everything, and tight end is very top-heavy to me. Last year's tight end class was awesome. Probably one of the best. I think it'll probably be one of the best of the last 20 years when we look back. But I do think Brock Bowers would have been the tight end one last year. So I think Brock Bowers, has the potential just to be awesome. Obviously, it's going to depend where he goes. I'm intrigued by Jatavian Sanders, but he still feels like a mid-round 2 guy to me. After that, I'm not really stoked about the tight end group. I'm sure someone will emerge, and we'll have to do our homework on that to see. But I would say for fantasy, that's probably how I'm viewing it.
Well, and we'll have some dedicated shows to breaking down running back, wide receiver, tight end, and so on, over the next several weeks here. And so we'll get deeper into the weeds on all those. But, as far as the Senior Bowl is concerned, man, we had a lot of guys kind of show out here. And, you're talking about 60 of these guys are probably going to be top 100 picks. That's what's bonkers. That's how much talent was there. We didn't have the high-end guys. We didn't have Caleb, didn't have Drake, didn't have Jaden Daniels, didn't have those guys, right? No Marvin Harrison, no Brock Bowers. But when you think about it, you're not getting any of those elite super premium guys, and you're still going to have about 60 of these guys in the top 100. It tells you there's a really heavy concentration of those guys that are going to live in probably, that pick 15, 16, 17, all the way up to, pick, 90, 95, and 100. So a lot of these guys will be playing on Sundays, probably on your favorite team, and a bunch of these guys are probably going to be on your dynasty rosters, and a few are probably going to be league winners on your redraft rosters. So definitely something to keep an eye on. We're going to have some more detailed analysis on individual players and some of the positional breakdowns. We'll do team breakdowns once we get a little closer and we kind of have some things solidified after free agency and all that. But for now, I think we're starting to get a really clear picture of how some of these guys look, and we're going to start seeing some rookie rankings. I figure we should probably do a ranking show in a few weeks, right? What do you think? Probably 3-4 weeks out?
Absolutely.
Hell yeah, let's do it, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that'll be great. In the short term, next week, how about we plan on doing a positional breakdown of running backs? We could talk about these Senior Bowl guys and then maybe pepper in those other guys, the Braylon Allens of the world and Jalen Wrights. Sound like a plan?
Yeah.
Cool.
Sounds
good.
Let's
do that. I know that we were trying to keep this thing relatively short. We're running about 45-ish minutes now, so we should probably bag it. Any other thoughts you want to send us out on?
No, just interested to see how the off season goes, man. It's gonna be fun.
Absolutely. Well, I think we go ahead and we send it off here. For Kyle Lindemann of Rotoballer, I'm Jeff DiMatteo of Gridiron Ratings. Just remember, friends, during scouting season, everyone has an opinion. Be disagreeable. Take care.